All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program. You know I'm talking Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul. A refreshing German lager in a can. Go to johnnycuba.us. Use the Johnny Locator. Find the nearest location to you. How else are you going to enjoy the start of all the Week 12 action beginning tonight? We got Steelers and Browns Thursday Night Football. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And, of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Joining us now is our pal, CBS Sports Fantasy Football expert, Jamey Eisenberg. Joins us every Thursday, helps us with who to start, who to sit. Jamey, good to see you. So the Dolphins, let's start outside the fantasy football realm. The Dolphins, they get back-to-back wins. They win last week. They're 4-6 now. They got the Patriots this weekend. They're one back in the loss column of the final playoff spot. Are you getting sucked in? Are you willing to fall for the rope-a-dope that the Dolphins are in the playoff picture?
They're definitely in the playoff picture, and imagine if Tua had played the entire season, they'd probably be in the driver's seat. You look at some of the losses, that have happened. The Cardinals lost. They lost the Titans.
Colts one is the one that's Colts and Titans are bad losses.
Yeah. So you look at those games and you say, okay, had those gone a different way, especially they're competing with the Colts. That's a different season right now, so they don't really have a big margin for error. I think you beat the Patriots, you see what happens going into the Packers game, and then you still have the two at the Jets, right, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So you control your own destiny if you can win these games.
You still got the Patriots one more time. Like, there's a lot of winnable games left on the schedule.
Yeah, so you gotta win the games that you're supposed to win, and hopefully get lucky with that Green Bay game stands out, for example. I think you got to be encouraged. Defense has certainly played, I think, above its head with the injuries. Without a pass rush, at least a significant pass rusher. I would like to see a little bit more mixture of the explosive plays. I was reading the story on ESPN about how the offense is comfortable with the way they're operating. With not having the big plays and getting off the field and putting their defense in some uncomfortable spots. But as a fantasy player, I'd like to see a few more explosive plays. Certainly some to Jaylen Waddle. But there's a lot to like about where they're headed right now.
How has Tua stacked up since his return? And here, we could address it fantasy-wise. How has Tua stacked up these last few games?
2 of 3 over 20 fantasy points, and in his last 3 outings. So starting to see some signs. Obviously, a 3-touchdown game against the Raiders is certainly what you're accustomed to, or at least hoping for. It's a good matchup against the Patriots. They just gave up a 4-touchdown game to Matthew Stafford. So with the way Jonnu Smith is playing now, he's certainly put himself in play with 6 teams on a bye to be a starting fantasy tight end. But even moving forward, I think you're going to buy into it a little bit. Tyreek getting back in the end zone was encouraging. Really, the disappointing player this year has been Jaylen Waddle. It's been every game since week 1, single digits in PPR, which is hard to do. No touchdowns, since no touchdowns, like 4 games, 1 touchdown in the season. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating. So he's getting close to being dropped in a lot of leagues. Devon Achane is a stud, just an absolute monster. It's going to be interesting to see. You hope it doesn't happen, but if he has to miss any time, who's the number 2 guy now? Is it Jaylen Wright? Is it Raheem Mostert? You would think they go to Mostert, just given his, standing in the league and being a veteran. But right now he's struggling. Fumbles have been an issue for him. I know he's battling a little bit of a hip injury right now, so hopefully he's okay. But Jaylen Wright's a good handcuff to roster right now, just in case something happens.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Jets this week. They fired general manager Joe Douglas. Number 1, what do you think Aaron Rodgers' future holds? And number 2, when he decides to retire, how heavily do we weigh this Jets season on the way we remember him?
You're always going to remember by the last image of a player, so it's going to be in people's minds. But as more time elapses, you'll remember how great he was with the Packers and what he did with that franchise, So we'll see. It could be a similar path with what Brett Favre did, going to Jets and then another team and seeing how, if another team would give him a chance. At 40, he looks washed up. How much the Achilles injury is still a problem for him. How much of the, lack of cohesion with the offensive group, from coordinator who he brought in to, players that, he brought in some regard. How much of that is on him? We'll probably find out with whoever the next coach and quarterback is. But I didn't like the firing of Joe Douglas. I thought he did some great things in the draft. When you get clearly, the guys at the top, Sauce Gardner was I think a no-brainer, but Breece Hall and some of the other guys they brought in on the defensive side of the ball, I didn't think it was a justified move. But look, Woody Johnson's going to be one of these owners that the more the spotlight is on him, the worse you see that this franchise is run. So they got to hit some home runs with the hires here, and I think they got to move on from Rodgers personally. But if he stays, it's just another year, I think, of purgatory for the Jets.
I got one more for you before we get to the games here. So Eli Manning is a semifinalist for Pro Football Hall of Fame. I find Eli Manning to be as fascinating a Hall of Fame case maybe we've ever had. Like, we've essentially been talking about this for the last 5 years. If Eli Manning, what are we going to do when he becomes eligible for the Hall of Fame? For me, as fascinating a case we've ever had.
I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Anytime you get 2 Super Bowl wins, that gives you a little bit of a notch up. And look, he's had a lot of, he's had great seasons. The 2 that we remember, he's had some playoff runs also. He's had some bad seasons, and this comes down to, are you a quarterback is the determining factor on wins and losses solely, and some people fall on that category. For me, I think, there's a lot of things at play. When he retired, he was in the top 10 of passing yards. His numbers do stack up with the second tier guys. He's not going to be regarded as the best of the best. He's not going to be regarded as his brother in terms of a passer. But he still has, numbers that stack up with Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks. Then you put the 2 Super Bowl rings on top of it. And I think also, when you factor in these things, because it's a human vote, he's such a great ambassador of the game, from what he does on the Manning cast to, being a representative at the Pro Bowl. A lot of it is clearly name recognition and what his family has done, but that's got to factor in also. So given his resume, I think he deserves it. He's definitely going to get in. It's just a matter of, is he first ballot or not? For me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
All right, Jamey, let's get to the action here. Steelers and Browns tonight. What do you like?
So we got to check on the weather. There could be some bad weather implications, which, impacts, really 4 receivers at this point, because in my opinion, I don't care who the quarterback is. What Pickens has done has put himself in the conversation to be a top 10 fantasy receiver with Russell Wilson. Without Russell Wilson, when it was Justin Fields, he was still a number 2 receiver, but he's just putting up great numbers and the focal point of the passing game right now. So the moon balls are great from Russ. Pickens is adjusting to him and doing a great job. So he's a number 1 receiver. And then the 3 Browns guys, look, since Jameis Winston has taken over, they're all getting 8 targets per game. For all 3 of them, they've been productive in at least 2 of the 3 starts. Tillman was the one left out last week. Elijah Moore was left out 2 games ago. Jerry Jeudy just had a blow-up spot with over 20 PPR points. So they're all in the conversation to be starting in 3 receiver leagues for this week, and in some cases 2 receiver leagues because 6 teams are on a bye. But if there's bad weather, that could impact everything. I would stay away from Nick Chubb. I don't like Jameis in this spot. So while he'll support his receivers, he's probably going to be a little turnover prone. So expect 40-plus passes, but this could be at best maybe like a 2-2, 250, 280, 2-2 type of game. So he's outside the top 12 for me. Wilson's a borderline starter. And I think Najee Harris, is based on his resume right now, is a solid number 2 fantasy running back.
Do you think the Steelers are a legit AFC contender? I mean, they're 8-2, but I can't believe this team is 8-2.
So I think when you look at the top of the conference, you're talking Buffalo, Kansas City are the, I think, head and shoulders above everybody else right now. Then based on how Pittsburgh beat Baltimore, that brings Baltimore back to the pack and obviously elevates the Steelers in a lot of people's minds. It was their first division game. I think based on how the division is going, they should be able to contain the Bengals. If they score on the Bengals, they'll win. They should be able to beat the Browns. Can they go into Baltimore and beat the Ravens one more time? You see the Jekyll and Hyde of Baltimore. When they're on, they're arguably the best team in football. When they're off, they just look a little bit disjointed. And so that defense got exposed a little bit throughout the course of the season. They did a good job against Pittsburgh. But if they can't stop the run against the Steelers, then they're going to beat Baltimore again. So, yes, they're legitimate contenders, but I don't think that they can beat Buffalo or can beat Kansas City if both those teams are on their game.
Dolphins and Patriots, 1:00 Sunday, CBS. What do we like? Are you, in fact, benching Jaylen Waddle?
If I can, again, 6 teams on a bye, it's difficult in 3 receiver leagues. So 2 receiver leagues, it's easy at this point. Again, 1 touchdown, hasn't found double digits in PPR since week 1. The targets just aren't there, and so at some point he's going to have a blow spot. As I wrote in start sit, where I had him as sit for what feels like forever. I'm almost doing it like as a reverse jinx, and hopefully he'll spite me and come out and have a big game because I want to see it. He was somebody that I was invested in this season. Jonnu Smith's presence, Devon Achane's presence in the passing game, that's really limited him. So, he's due, and as we've said on our shows, he's still worth holding on to because it's almost like a handcuff running back. If something happens to Tyreek Hill, his numbers will pop. Maybe something happens to Jonnu Smith, his numbers will pop. You don't want to see that as a Dolphins fan, but Waddle certainly has the upside to still be a top 15 wide receiver. So hold him if you can, but sit him if you can as well. As we said at the beginning, Jonnu's a must-start tight end this week. Tyreek Hill's still a must-start wide receiver. Tua's a top 10 quarterback. Devon Achane's a must-start running back. And for the Patriots, you're seeing, guys emerging. So Hunter Henry's been great with Drake May. He's a must-start tight end. May is a good bye week replacement. The Dolphins defense has certainly not been the same from a statistics standpoint in terms of holding opposing quarterbacks down. They just gave up over 22 points, almost 22 points, 21.9 points to Gardner Minshew. And Ramondre Stevenson, big game against the Dolphins in week 5. I think he'll have another good game this week as well.
How about the Cowboys and Commanders and Jayden Daniels? Is he still a must start? He's fallen off a little bit the last couple of weeks.
He definitely has fallen off. Part of it has been matchups. Playing Philadelphia, for example, that's one of the best defenses in football. But the rib injury, I think, has been a problem as well. I think the mini bye, playing on a Thursday, coming back playing this week, it helps that you're getting the Cowboys off a Monday night game, so they're going to have a little bit worse legs. You should have fresh legs. This should be a get-right spot. I mean, this Cowboys defense is certainly beat up right now. They're going to be on the field a lot because the offense can't move the ball. So I like Jayden Daniels to bounce back in a big way. Same with Terry McLaurin. Brian Robinson Jr. is my start of the week, so I think he's going to have a big game taking on the Cowboys' run defense. Again, tired group. And then for the Cowboys, the only guy you could trust at this point is CeeDee Lamb. So desperate situation. Look at Luke Schoonmaker, backup tight end for them because Jake Ferguson's in the concussion protocol. He just had 10 targets. And then maybe Rico Dowdle if you're stuck, but it's just a bad offense right now. They're down potentially 2 offensive linemen as well. Both guards are banged up.
49ers Packers, Fox NFL game of the week. What do you like there? And Christian McCaffrey, is this the weekend? Are we going to see a Christian McCaffrey game finally?
Hope so. The first game back, he looked a little bit better than he did last week, but he's going to work through some rust. No training camp. That's typical for some of these guys that have a long layoff. So at some point, it's usually game 3 or game 4. You start to see the best of these guys when they're coming off these long layoffs, but you're starting him no matter what. Jawan Jennings has become a stud. Last 2 games, he's had 11 targets. He's become the number 1 receiver for the 49ers. George Kittle is expected to return. Just keep an eye on that injury. We didn't have him last week, which I think impacted Brock Purdy. Deebo Samuel's been struggling, but I think you're still starting him again with 6 teams on a bye. You can't bench him. And then for the Packers, look, it's going to be a pick your poison of who the best wide receiver is. Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, the 2 you trust the most, but there's no real rhyme or reason to who's going to be the best of the bunch. It's a tough matchup, obviously, against San Francisco. Josh Jacobs is clearly a must-start running back, and I think Jordan Love's still a must-start quarterback.
Jamie, who've been some of the hot waiver wire pickups this week?
So it's been a weird week again with 6 teams on a bye. Anthony Richardson and the way he performed last week, you buy back into it just to see what happens. I don't love the matchup this week against Detroit, but week 13 he gets the Patriots. So if he plays well this week, you're going to love him next week against New England. Drake May as well, coming off another strong game for him last week, taking on the Dolphins, should have another good game. So those are my 2 favorite bye week quarterbacks. 2 running backs that may be prominent this week because of injury. Roshan Johnson, DeAndre Swift is banged up, but he could be getting a bigger role with the coordinator change that they made last week. And then Amir Abdullah. The Raiders have both their running backs banged up right now with Zamir White and Alexander Madison. So Abdullah could be a big factor in the passing game, but might get a bigger role as well. Receiver, it was Christian Watson for the Packers, coming off a 150-yard day on 4 targets. Jordan Love only threw 17 passes last week, so that shows you how good of a day that Watson may have had. And then Elijah Moore, again, just playing really well for the Browns with how Jameis is performing, 8+ targets in 3 games in a row. And then the 2 tight ends that I love this week are Will Dissly and Jonnu Smith. Again, Jonnu, 6 catches, 100+ yards, and 2 touchdowns. Hard to overlook with what he's done recently. And Will Dissly, they almost mirror each other. They have 4 of their last 5 games, 7.5 to 8 PPR points or more, 2 blow-up games in those stretches, and 2 good matchups this week. So those guys are top 10 tight ends for me this week.
Who we keep an eye on for injuries today?
So you got the Raiders backfield, as I mentioned. You got Mike Evans. Is he going to return? That's the expectation. George Kittle, is he going to return? Same thing. Expectation is he's going to be out there. Sam Laporta missed last week with a shoulder injury. He's practicing full, so that's a good sign. Then you got some minor injuries. Brock Purdy's got an elbow injury. I think he'll be okay. Sam Darnold, I think, is dealing with a hand injury. I think he'll be okay. Really, the big injury. Oh, and the big one really is Isaiah Pacheco. Is he going to return? So able to practice in a limited fashion. Andy Reid did not commit to him playing this week. For me, if I'm the Chiefs, I hold him out one more week. Get that leg right. They can beat the Panthers with you or me playing running back there. So I'd hold him out just to make sure he's healthy.
Great job, Jamie. Tell everybody how they can hear you leading up to tonight's game and throughout the weekend.
Yeah, CBS Sports HQ, CBSSports.com. You can check out all of my written content there. And then our Fantasy Football Today podcast, which you can find on YouTube under the same name. we got you covered. The playoffs are getting close, so check us out, and we'll help you win a championship.
Awesome. Great job, Jamey. Thank you, pal. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.